evening, everyone. Welcome. We are honored to have you here. I also want to wish our viewers who have joined us on Zoom from all over the world. And I especially want to give a shout out and a big hello to Ori Soltis, who is the editor and one of the writers of this fine book. You will meet him in the evening and plenty. My name is Nasil, and I'm one of the board members of the Indian Jewish Heritage Center. Today, we are gathered here to introduce you all to a book named Growing Up Jewish in India. The volume combines discussions of the Indian Jewish communities contributed by Ori Soltis, Yael Silliman, Erica Leons, Barbara Johnson, Ralph Fitzgerald, Ona Eliyahu Oron, and our very own Siona Benjamin. I will stop here, as I do not want to wish that you hear it all. I do want you people to hear from Siona herself. I do wish to acknowledge here that the Indian Cultural Center is the right venue for any major event, and we are truly grateful to the director of ICC, Mr. Bolger. Big thank you very much. Bolger, will you please come and say a few words? Thank you.
Hello. Good evening. Erev Tov Lekulam. Thank you very much for coming here today to this special event featuring Siona Benjamin ji. This is the first time I believe that you are at the Indian Cultural Center. And 5 years ago, when our Prime Minister Narendra Modi was here during the historic visit to Israel, the first ever visit by Prime Minister, one of his promises was that we will have the cultural center, which will act as a bridge between the Indian and the Israeli communities. And as it has always been, the Indian Jewish community has been the bedrock of our civilization relations, not just like, as they say, we are just 74, 75 years young as countries, but our nation states go back to thousands of years, and it's all thanks to people, the Jewish community back in India and here, who have ensured that the continuity and the links have always remained. So I believe that towards the mandate of the ICC, on the idea on which it was established, we are very happy to have you here, you are our cultural link and bridge between the Indian society, the Jewish community here in Israel, and also back in the United States. So it is visible in your art, in your writings, and your whole persona as an artist. I mean, what you convey, what you embody, it conveys the people-to-people relation that has been, as I was saying, the main fulcrum around which the entire, like say, relationship has been based. And I'm yet to go through your book, but I have been reading your works, especially like say when a few years ago we have some of the books at the embassy, and I truly loved them all. And I'm eagerly waiting to read the new book. And hello, Mr. Ori Soltis. Thank you for joining via Zoom, and looking forward to hear more from you about the book, and also a little backstory of how it came through, and also the different contributions that were there from eminent members of the Indian Jewish community. Thank you, Avner ji and Liz Marcel ji, for making this happen. As we have always told you, this is your place, and please feel free. And anytime that you want to host an event, we'll be very glad to do that. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay. Namaste, good evening, Erev Tov. My name is Avner. I was born in India, but did not have the privilege of growing up in India. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Professor Ori Soltis, participating by Zoom, the artist Siona Benjamin and her daughter Rachel, Mr. Sanit Borgam, Director of ICC, members of the Indian Jewish Heritage Center, Cochin Heritage Center, dear friends and dear Zoom participants, thank you everyone. Every book, every movie, and I guess in the spirit of time, every post, TikTok, that shows our glorious Indian heritage is important and should be promoted and praised by all of us. Growing Jewish in India is another important documentation of our community's heritage. Professor Ori Solz made a brilliant job in gathering the writers. Each one wrote a chapter, and together they're giving us a full and comprehensive picture on the life of the Jewish communities in India. Erika Leons, the founder and editor-in-chief of Asian Jewish Life, wrote a preface about the migration of the communities. Orna Eliyahu and Barbara Johnson wrote about the synagogues of the Cochini communities in Kerala. Professor Yael Silman wrote the story of the Baghdadi Jews of Calcutta and their beautiful synagogues. And Siona Benjamin, that we have the privilege of having her here today, that we are fortunate also to have her here with us, wrote about her culture, experience of growing Jewish in India, and last but not least, the editor and the initiator of the book, Professor Ori Solz, the integrator and the author of few chapters connecting all the dots together. And as I said, it's another jewel of the community bookshelf. Professor Ori teaches art history, theology, philosophy, and political history in Georgetown University. He's the author of nearly 300 books, articles, exhibition catalogs, and essays on a variety of topics. We are very fortunate to have him here with us in Zoom, and he will speak, I hope, soon. Recently, we heard about the destroying of the cemetery in Panvel in Maharashtra. It is not the first time, and unfortunately, not the last time, that such an event of destroying a Jewish site is taking place, erasing evidence and existence of the Jewish community. I'm not blaming here, and it's of course, it's the course of history. It happens for many reasons, and I won't count them, but it is our duty and our task, all community members, to do all we can to prevent, to save. We need to get united together and find creative ways to keep our heritage sites safe. There is a saying in Hebrew that says, let's all get together under the stretcher. בוא ניכנס כולם מתחת לאלונקה. And that's what we need to do. One of the values that we learned and embraced as Jews living in India, with all its religious diversity, is how to live in harmony with all our neighbors. We need to adjust to the changes in the needs and requirements of the people living near and around these sites, and find a path for a win-win situation that will benefit all sides. If we wish our heritage to be preserved and kept, I'll admit her, in India for coming generations, then we need to get together. And IJHC and the Nevatim Heritage Center and our project, building a cultural center in Nevatim, is an important task and a huge milestone that we need to do for keeping our glorious heritage, which is unfortunately fading away. Congratulations to Ori, Siona, Yael, Erika, Orna, Barbara, and to the community for publishing this book. I want to thank Liz Masil for organizing this wonderful event. Thank you, Rochelle, for preparing the snacks that we all enjoyed eating outside. I was born in India, but did not have the privilege of growing in India. This book showed me what it means growing Jewish in India. Thank you and enjoy.
And now, I wish to welcome Ms. Rachel Kruger, who is Siona's daughter and a rising chef. She also treated us with the refreshments today, and I think that was a great job. Thank you so much. Please come and introduce yourself.
Okay, shalom everyone. As you just mentioned, I am Siona Benjamin's daughter. I'm Rachel Sophia Krug, and I'm currently living in Israel for 6 months, and I'm doing a Masa program where I am attempting to learn Hebrew, and it is very difficult with Ulpan, and I'm also doing an internship in an Israeli restaurant in Tel Aviv. Called Santa Katerina. And most importantly, I'm here actually researching Indian Jewish recipes to write a cookbook. So that is my goal here. That's my main goal. That's my reason that I'm here in Israel, to actually research and talk to people in my community. Growing up in New Jersey with my mom, we made a wide variety of food. We made Indian food, Italian food, Mexican food, so much food. So I've always seen her cook. No cookbook, just tossing ingredients in a bowl, and it's always been delicious and wonderful. So that's kind of where I've always loved cooking from and making it with my mom. As you can see, we've made lots of fun dishes together. But I decided I had to be practical and I have to go to school for business, which is a great idea in the long run, I think. But it wasn't where my heart was at, and really felt like something was missing. So my mom has always really just been a living example of someone that has followed her passion, has been successful and creative with it. So I thought, why can't I do it? So that's why I'm here. And that's why I decided to go to culinary school in New York. I went to the Institute of Culinary Education, where I learned more health supportive culinary arts. And it was such an awesome curriculum. We learned how to heal with food. We learned, we specialized in vegetarian food, and it was really an awesome school. So fast forward, I'm in Israel and I'm eating tons of delicious food, as you can see. These are all my own photos from around Israel. And I'm also meeting amazing new friends from around the world. One of them is here today from the Masa program. And I also got to do a 7-day Taglit trip, which is a life-changing experience. So through all that, I'm seeing food, I'm eating food, and I'm learning, I'm meeting people. I'm eating falafel to malabi to shawarma to shakshuka, and this Yemenite wrap filled with tomato, cheese, and olives. It was amazing. It was delicious. And to even having Shabbat dinners with my family and eating their delicious curries to their Israeli salads. It's really quite amazing. And then, of course, all the food I'm learning at the restaurant is a life-changing experience. That fast-paced energy, you can't get it anywhere else, and it is hard labor for sure. So, like I said, I'm here to write a cookbook, and so far I've had the pleasure to go to many Indian Jewish homes, and still many more to go. And they've taught me some wonderful recipes. So this is like a video. So in that video, I just want to thank Seema Rubin Dandekar and Liz Shalom for helping me make those first 2 really important dishes. And like I said, there's many more to go. We learned how to make narli bat, albras, chawli green curry, nankatai, which I hope you guys all enjoyed today. That was my first time making it by myself, and it was a good experience. It turned out well. So yeah, these are just some of the photos I've taken so far. And again, many more to go before I leave. And, really being in Israel and experiencing all of the food and in being with the Indian Jewish community and learning these traditional recipes, it really is going to help shape this book and really bring knowledge and support and awareness to this community and to my community and to our community, because no one really knows. Like, my friends know I'm Indian, but no one knows really outside of that, right? So it's hopefully going to share a lot, and And I hope to create, capture some audience with some more of my own hybrid recipes. So along with the Indian Jewish traditional recipes, I hope to create something new. So my favorite class in school was recipe writing, and I loved it. And it was really a thrilling and fun and creative time. So some examples that I've done so far is a Puran Poli Hamantashen for Purim, kind of a fun little twist. And then samosa latkes in the middle with a green pea chutney, which was also very delicious for Hanukkah. And then lastly, which you guys have enjoyed today, is I made a Melita inspired stuffed date, so that there's the flattened rice with nuts and a little sweetener dipped in chocolate, because why not dip everything in chocolate? So that's like kind of the gist of what my goal is here, and I really hope to fulfill it and create a really beautiful cookbook. I'm going to go to India with my mom and kind of complete that journey. But I think that it'll be wonderful.
Let us now welcome Ori Soltis, who is on Zoom. Soltis, please give us behind the scenes stories on the whole process till the book went to print. We'd love to know.
Okay, אז אני מתחיל. ערב טוב לכולם. Namaste, good evening. From where I am, it's early afternoon. And I'll say just a bit about the book, its contents, as a kind of lead-in to Siona, who I know will talk about her own experience and her art. Siona and I talked about this book initially because we were thinking, well, how could we do a book about her art? But unfortunately, Siona is alive. She's not dead. And she is famous, but not world famous. And nowadays, publishers of art books want dead world famous artists, or they're not interested. So we talked about something larger in which we could embed her. And so I think I suggested, why don't we do something that would discuss the Indian Jewish community broadly, and within that context, her experience of growing up as a Jew within India, and that experience of being surrounded by and having most of her friends as Muslims and Hindus, and going to Farsi or Zoroastrian and Catholic schools, and being the only daughter of her parents, and being affected by everything from Bollywood to Chitramra comic books, and then coming to America to study art, and then being hit hard by pop art, by abstract expressionism, which she rejected as not her medium, that was thrown at her by her teachers, and ended up staying for 30 years, and how her art developed. So the book starts out with a discussion of the various Indian Jewish communities. So you're looking now at this slide very quickly that gives you a very schematic sense of Jews who are in this vast country of vast diversity. You go from the Himalayas in the north, the cool, crisp weather, to the hot, steaming weather all the way in the south. And you're speaking of a country with 23 official languages, about 415 languages actually being spoken overall, of different types: Dravidian languages in the south, Indo-Aryan subsets of Indo-European languages to the center and north, and so on. Bengali, Marathi, Hindi on the one hand, Tamil, Kannada, and Malayalam on the other hand, and so on. And of course, religious diversity at the same time, what we somewhat erroneously refer to as Hinduism, because all it means is Indianism, is of course a form of faith that posits a single Godhead, but an endless array of manifestations and expressions of that. And there is no religious contention amongst the different devotees of different aspects of divinity in particular. If I'm a Krishnite, I understand that Krishna is the primary manifestation of divinity, and then I look to the Bhagavad Gita as a source, a revealed source, a Shruti source for that understanding. If I'm not, if let's say I'm a Vaishnavite, then I understand Krishna to be an avatar of Vishnu, and I look at the Gita as part of the Mahabharata, which is not a Shruti, but a Smrti, a man-made text. It's not revealed. And so I perceive it differently, but we're not fighting over it. And beyond that, more Muslims in India than almost anywhere else on the planet. Buddhists, Sikhs, Jains, Parsis, Baha'is, Christians, and of course, Jews. And it's not surprising that for the most part, Jews have not experienced anti-Semitism in India because of the vastness of its diversity. So Jews have been part of this rather colorful tapestry, each of which retains its significant and own threads, and all of which interweave to create what we call India. And so the map gives you a rather schematized sense of three primary communities: the so-called Baghdadis in the area of Kolkata to the east, of whom we have evidence by the 18th and 19th centuries. They come from Arabic-speaking, Farsi-speaking, for that matter, English-speaking kind of places, and they're first noted in the West in a text of 1730. And on the second hand, we have the Cochini to the south in Kerala and that part of the world, the traditions of which assert that the Cochini arrived as traders during the time of Solomon, so 1,000 years before the Common Era, and that more arrived after the destruction of the Second Temple, so that would be in the 1st century of our own time, and more came in the 15th and 16th centuries, the Paradesis, lighter skinned, and more from the Netherlands in the 17th century, and so on and so forth, more in the 19th century. And those who came in the 19th century claimed that they had ancestors that had actually come with St. Thomas, one of the disciples of Jesus, back in the 1st century. So a vast array of traditions with respect to the points and places and times of origin of the Jews who end up in Kerala, in the Cochin area. And then last but certainly not least, the largest group overall, the Beni Israel, who numbered by the time of 1948, by the time when both Israel and India were moving toward independence, about 20,000. And the traditions, once again, we have on the one hand the first documents that reference them coming in the 18th century in 1768. And then we have references to origins from the time of Solomon, from the time of the lost 10 tribes in the middle of the 8th pre-Christian century associated with them, from the time of the Hasmoneans, the Hanukkah story, in the middle of the 2nd century. And the most common, perhaps, the story of survivors of a shipwreck that occurred on the Konkan coast south of Mumbai, of which there were 14 survivors, 7 men and 7 women, who lost all of their holy texts. What they remembered was the Shema Yisrael, and they carried that with them. There's a later tradition of more Beni Israel coming from South Arabia in the 5th and 6th centuries, and so on. The Beni Israel came to be called Shani Warteli, the Saturday oil pressers. This was suggested in the 1830s, associating perhaps both the idea of Hanukkah and the oil story with the uniqueness of Shabbat for the Jewish community kept by the Beni Israel when other aspects of their world had been lost to them. And in a way, they are rediscovered by the Cochini, by David Rahabi, who began training young men once again to read Hebrew. And then there's a question of which David Rahabi. Someone from about 1,000, someone from about 1,400. Is it the same as David Ezekiel Rahabi, the 17th, 18th century figure, who is mentioned in a letter in the 18th century, a Dutch letter with respect to trading, and so on and so forth? The Beni Israel really get going as far as the West is aware of them when Anglican missionaries come to try and convert them. And it's mainly John Wilson, who in 1827 founds a school at Alibag. And by 1836, he had about 250 students, a third of them female. He wrote a Hebrew grammar in Marathi. He wrote about biblical customs, and he complained that these Beni Israel didn't know much about their Judaism, but they wouldn't convert to Christianity, which is what he hoped for, because they stuck very much to the world of which they were part. So we have these three communities, and it turns out that by the 1970s, from the Himalayas in the north, there's another community from the Mizo and Kuki tribes who had converted to Christianity and then convert to Judaism, claiming that they reclaimed their origins as one of the lost 10 tribes. And so they became the Beni Menashe. And by the 1990s, all the way in the south, the Beni Ephraim also emerged. So it turns out we end up with 5 different groups of Jews diverse in India, in an India that is so diverse in and of itself. And very briefly, we have a whole range of different kinds of synagogues. This is the interior of a synagogue at Reb Danda, for example, very different from the interior of the synagogue at Ahmadabad. And you can see, the style here is kind of a classical style. And the setup of the interior is the sort of interior you would have in the Mizrahi and Sephardi, not in the Mizrahi and the Sephardi, but in the Ashkenazi world, oddly enough, because these are Ashkenazi Jews, are not Ashkenazi Jews, in that we've got the bima, the teva in the center rather than at the far end, and the aron or heichal at the opposite end. So middle to opposite, that's Ashkenazi style. Sephardi Mizrahi tends to be opposite far ends from each other. Stylistically, though, we look at, by comparison to the Ahmedabad interior, and we recognize this early 20th century work is art deco, and it follows that sort of style. If we look, for example, to the exterior of the Ohel David synagogue, from a distance, who would even imagine this as a synagogue? It's entirely out of not the Gothic, but the late 19th century neo-Gothic style of church making in England, which reflects the identity of the architect that was brought in to do this wonderful synagogue. No two of them are alike, and they are in diverse materials, and they're in the cities, they're in the countryside, dozens of them. Most of them, of course, at this point, more or less abandoned, as most of the Jews from India have settled in Israel. The Bene Israel, like the Cochini and like the Baghdadi and like the Bene Menashe and the Bene Ephraim, all have their own particular collections, as it were, of elements that tie them together with each other and to tie them together with Jews all over the world. So Sifrei Torah, books of the Torah, for example, this is the Aron HaKodesh, the Heichal of the Ahmedabad synagogue, and you recognize that the Torah scrolls are kept in a kind of hard carapace, which is beautifully decorated, in this case with silver and silver inscriptions and floral elements that festoon this velvet-covered wood case. The yad with which you read it is used doing double duty, kind of to help keep it closed when it's standing there. And you pull it out from the ark and you open it and you read it vertically. And the tas is not there as a separate entity. If anything, we would say this is the tas, the shield. And this is the keter, the crown, together at the same time with the rimonim. All of this is the sort of basic format that you would find across the Middle East and North Africa in the Mizrahi style, and often in the Sephardi style. Sometimes in the Sephardi and always in the Ashkenazi style, as many of you probably know, you have a completely soft carapace, not a hard one, and you pull it off the Torah scrolls and you lay them down to read from it. So it's a slightly different style of dealing with the Torah at the time of reading it, and when you keep it in its place when it's not being read, how it is covered. And similarly, like synagogues all over the planet, the Tiferet Israel synagogue here has a Ner Tamid, and it hangs before the Holy Ark as a symbol, of course, of God's eternal presence. And no two of them are alike across the world. Certainly no two of them are alike across India, but very distinctive for Indian decor, of course, is festooning this wonderfully carved up work of brass with floral elements that, as it were, connect the interior of the sanctuary to the world of nature outside, underscoring the fact that if this is, after all, a symbol of God's presence and a symbol that hangs, never to go out, before the holy ark in which God's word in the Torah scrolls is kept, then we're reminded that God is also found outside the walls of the sanctuary, outside the walls of the synagogue, out in nature, which is part and parcel of that which God hath wrought, as we have been partners in creating the sanctuary, the synagogue, the holy ark, the Ner Tamid, the writing out of the Torah scrolls, partners with God in this ongoing process of trying to order the world in a way. And so, like every place else, India's Jewish communities have here and there their cemeteries. And I remind you that the first thing that a Jewish community does is create a cemetery, because you need sacred space into which to place those who are going to reside there until the Messianic era. Synagogues can take their time because you can pray anywhere and everywhere. You don't require a synagogue per se. And in this case, the Panwell Cemetery, of course, is in great disarray because the community is gone. So you've got a caretaker who does his best, but the stones are beautifully, dramatically, and in a certain sense, tragically, barely discernible as what they once were. And of course, we heard just a few minutes ago that a more functional cemetery was recently vandalized. Altogether a different and separate and tragic kind of outcome. So these communities have all of these qualities that they share with each other and with Jewish communities across the planet. And then they have their own distinctive features that make them distinct. So for example, one of the most important figures within the Bnei Israel community is Elijah, Elijah the prophet. Now, Elijah is significant across the Jewish world. We think of him always both at the end of Shabbat, where part of the Havdalah ceremony includes the chanting of the song Eliyahu Hanavi Hatishbi that yields and yearns for the coming of the Messiah at some indiscriminate and nondescript future moment. And also, of course, in the context of the Passover Seder, where we have a goblet of wine that is left aside for Eliyahu, and he also becomes part of that. But for the Bnei Israel, Elijah is a part of everything. He's there all the time. Every Bnei Israel house, this comes from Siona's grandmother's house, this particular image, has some version or other of not of Siona, but of Elijah going up to heaven in a chariot of fire. And the Bnei Israel take on this is not that the chariot is on fire, but that I suppose the speed with which it takes off generates fire along the tracks where the wheels were rolling as angels conveyed him up into heaven, never dying, ever to be available and a present to come back to the Jewish world of the here and now at times of stress, at times of joy, and hopefully at a future. But what makes the Bnei Israel conception even more unique than unique is this, that there is the site where, according to Bnei Israel tradition, there is still the track, one of the tracks of those chariot wheels. So now you see a ceremony which is involved in decorating, in championing the track, and you understand there's no contradiction between the idea that Elijah rose from heaven in Eretz Yisrael, as it indicates in the biblical text, and yet from India at this particular site that is venerated by the Bnei Israel. I'll come back to that in just a moment. One other very obvious, and it brings us full circle in a sense to where this evening for you, afternoon for me began with Rachel, Siona's daughter, who created a updated version of Malida, because one of the distinctive foodstuffs of the Bnei Israel is the Malida platter, which, as you can see, is with sweetened rice and with flowers and with a diversity of fruits. And the apparent origin of the Malida platter is that when those 14 refugees, 7 males, 7 females, that are regarded as the progenitors of the Bnei Israel community, were embraced by and became acquainted over time with their neighbors, they would be invited when the Muslims or when the Hindus had celebrations with distinctive kinds of foods. And they said, look, we've got to have distinctive foods as well. And because the Bnei Israel evolved, as did other Jewish communities in India, to have a particular specialty with respect to international trade. So why not bring foods from elsewhere and combine them into this unique platter that is, in a sense, in its essence, international in the components that make it up? The foodstuffs are not necessarily indigenous and unique to India itself. It reflects a combination of being at home and rooted in the indigenous Indian world and recognizing one's connection to the world outside and bringing that all together in the kind of gastronomic way that, of course, brings all peoples together when they eat instead of fight. And that's what the Malit is ultimately really all about. So the Jewish community, with its 5 parts, as it were, has for the most part moved to Eretz Yisrael, to Israel. And one of the unique features of how Indian Jews, and forgive me for speaking on behalf of most of my audience who knows this better than I, is the uniqueness of that community is its relationship with Israel and with India. There's no contradiction. There's no contradiction between the story of Elijah in India and the story of Elijah in Israel, because there's no contradiction to having a mother and a father. So the one country is the mother, the other country is the father. So Indian Jews ideally feel comfortable in both realities, and as we heard earlier, are positioned to be a bridge between India and Israel. So what you're seeing here is the artist's conception of a proposal that will expand what has been present already and has been present for a long time, the Cochin Cultural Center, to what will become the first of its kind, a broad Indian Jewish cultural center. And you can see it's got a synagogue, a spiritual complex, events pavilion, and so on. And you will also realize that what you have here is that stylized, it's the form of a stylized lotus. So a blossom that is particularly important for India and Indian culture, a blossom, the implications of which is a form of samsara, the ongoing cycle of life, death, life, a sort of immortality, because the lotus closes up at night and it opens up in the morning, day by day, night by night, evening by evening, dawn by dawn. Here's an artist's conception of how the whole thing will look in the full 3-dimensional sort of way. And what you can't tell from this image is that much of the vegetation that is here, or rather will be here, is imported from India. So it's not just an Indian Jewish cultural center. It is, in the same sense in which the blossoms hanging from the Ner Tamid that I showed you connect the interior world of the sanctuary where God is addressed and worshiped to the exterior world which God hath wrought. So this cultural center will encompass elements that reflect its presence in Israel and its connection to India, both in the formation of the man-made buildings that are part of it and the formation of the vegetation that, with the agency of human hand, will be brought from India, combined with what is in Israel, in both cases, part of the larger reality that we associate with God, with what God has made. To end up in the only place that I can and should end up, which is where I began, Siona Benjamin, who is the inspiration for this volume and obviously a major contributor to it, is part of both communities. In fact, she's part of all 3 communities, the communities of India, Israel, and the United States. And her work and her experience reflects all of that. But I will say nothing about Siona because she's about to speak on her own behalf, and I don't want to take any time away from what she will say. Thank you all very much for your patience.
Can I speak over here? Okay. I'm a transcultural artist. I believe in transculturalism will help in artistic and other ways to be a bridge between the traditional and the modern. A transcultural person is rather like a chameleon, being able to change his or her colors according to the situation and environment. Today's world politics pushes and promotes a need for a sense of belonging, a categorization of sorts, a push to take sides, either black or white. The gray scale in between needs to be explored so that when one makes final evaluations, it is painted with a fairness that allows us to learn about all perspectives and points of view. So these are some of my, this is a family picture of my mother's sister. I have a lot of pictures, family pictures in my books. My father's side family, my mother's side family. This is my mother's sister. Before they immigrated to Israel, and now they're all in Israel, and I'm all connected to them. And they have this. My mother's sister is Minna, who's sitting with the child on her lap. She's become a great grandmother, and she recently passed away. So I just wanted to put this picture in her honor. This is my mother putting henna on the hands of her sister-in-law. sister-in-law Diana, and this is in the 1950s. So I had managed to gather a lot of these photographs from my mother and my father's side, and Aunt of mine gave me a whole bunch of pictures from my father's side. Also, what happened? Here's a very wonderful picture of an Indian Jewish bride with henna on her hands. Very wonderful example of, very often in America, people would ask me, how come you have henna? Like, that's not Jewish. And I say, well, that is Jewish. It's just as Jewish as matzah ball soup. Now, I didn't grow up eating matzah ball soup. I had coconut curries and halwas and wonderful food like that. And I think the world is slowly learning about differences in our Jewish community, and the fact that these differences are amazing and not something which is weird and therefore different from who I am, therefore it is not acceptable. And I think slowly we have to educate people in that way, to let them know about the fact that these differences are not weird, but they are actually unique and different. And I think that's what Uri and me were trying to do with this book, and also I try to do with my art. I'm going to go on to show you a little bit about my art. I can read something else. Being American can be re-explored. That can be accomplished by being able to view the world outside of the bubble of one's own country, race, and religion. That's what I feel is really important. I believe that art can be an important vehicle in this endeavor. This involves not just presenting to my audience the uniqueness of immigrant cultures, but going outside beyond this and exploring what has been born out of the specifics of that immigrant culture. So that means, let me explain that a little bit while he's fixing this. So for me, what is important is you take your culture, and like my grandmother made Puran Poli, and it's wonderful and it's nostalgic and it's amazing, and I remember that. But for me as an artist, that wasn't enough. That for me is, I'm supposed to take from this culture, but how do I recycle it and make something new out of it? How do I, so I read the book by Joseph Campbell, The Power of Myth. And the Power of Myth talks about how mythology is so present in all our lives. And this mythology is important in a way that we don't even recognize it. We don't even know that it is there. And the color of the shirt or the dress or the clothes that you choose is based on your personal mythology of how you choose it. And so that uniqueness of your mythology is with you, and some of us don't even recognize it or don't even understand it. So in my art, I thought about, how do I take the uniqueness of my culture, but recycle it and make it sort of new and unique and different, so that I can present to my audience something which is proudly from my heritage, but at the same time, I have renewed it, or made it something different. So my art that you will see now, hopefully, you'll be able to see it in a way that, don't think of it as exactly, what does this mean? Or what does that mean? Or can you explain that to me? Art cannot be explained 100%. It is something that has to be felt. It has to be something that has to be, your soul has to be stirred by it. And so when you make art, it is about that. It is about making art that stirs the soul of yourself, but also hopefully of your audience. This is one of the precious pictures. My parents, my mother and father, my naming ceremony, Rabbi Green from New York, from London, and my grandfather David. I have many precious pictures. This is my naming ceremony. Rabbi Green presided at my naming ceremony, and is this going to move forward? Hopefully. Yes. Okay. So this is one of the many pictures which is in the book, but also I have tons of pictures. My parents, for some reason, they sent out a photographer in the 50s to photograph all the synagogues. And I found these curled up pictures in my mother's closet. and there were these tiny little pictures, couldn't find the negatives, of black and white photographs of these beautiful synagogues that they had sent out a photographer to photograph all the synagogues. And so I slowly, flattened them out and I scanned them, and some of them are in the book. So I think these sort of memories I had to record in so many ways. Photograph like this, my mother's, from my mother's side, my great-great-grandfather, the long beard, the turban, the Star of David in his pocket. So these kind of photographs that I managed to have and save were really, really precious to me. And so in my painting, sometimes in my art, I'm wearing a turban. And that turban is my great-great-grandfather's turban. And it is something which is like I'm carrying this Oriental turban with me, because people always ask me, where are you from? And I say normally I used to say I'm from India, and they say, no, but what are you, like Zoroastrian, Iranian, what are you? And I would say, I'm a Jew from India. And they would say, they would have either fall down in surprise, or they would say, oh my God, I've heard of those people, like, oh my God. And they would call their spouse and say, come and see this Indian Jew. And so I kind of this turban became bigger and bigger and bigger in my head, because it was this Oriental turban that I carried all so much in my art. And so this is the book that hopefully we're going to talk a little bit more about. I'm inspired a lot by Indian miniature paintings. I studied Indian miniature paintings in India in an art school. I studied Indian miniature paintings with a miniature painter in Jaipur. And I love the detail in Indian miniature painting. I also love Christian, Jewish, Islamic illuminated manuscripts. So I also studied a lot of that. I also studied with rabbis at JTS, Jewish Theological Seminary, where I also studied Midrash. So Midrash is a very important part of my work. It is about taking the stories from Midrash, recycling them. And there are many artists. I'm the founding member of Jewish Art Salon, and Jewish Art Salon has thousands of members now, and a lot of the artists use Midrash in their work. That is, they use the stories from the Torah, but they recycle them to tell new stories through their art. So in my art, I'm influenced by Eastern and Western art, by India. I have an MFA in painting. In the US, I also have a second MFA in theater set design, which has opened new avenues and inspiration for me. So I'm going to tell you about a few works. For example, Finding Home number 56, Zacham, is inspired from a page in the Quran, but also from Jewish illuminated manuscripts. Are the swords a weapon that will descend on her, or are they a protection against unforeseen dangers? What seems like Urdu or Arabic above actually spells it's unfortunate in English. So somebody has told me, what is that profound Arabic word on the top? I'm like, it's English. And there's like, oh my God, what is it? And it says, it's unfortunate. And people ask me, what is unfortunate? I must have been reading the newspaper in the morning, and I must have been reading some unfortunate news that we read all around, okay, like what's happening in Ukraine or anywhere else. And I might have said, oh, it's so unfortunate. I came into my studio, I was doing this painting, I wrote it above. So it's something spontaneous that sometimes happens in the life of an artist, where you use something which is happening right now and you feel you want to record it in some way. This is the bottom of the painting. She's wearing her red sari. It's feeding the plants. In the center, there's the Shema, which is protecting her. The swords are there. Some people say it is a weapon. Some people say it is protecting her. So it depends on how you see it, how the audience sees it, as to how you can interpret it. And I like my audience to interpret it their way. So here's another painting, which is a midrashic painting, which is inspired by Vashti. Vashti was the wife of Achashverosh, who was expelled right in the beginning of the story of Purim. And I have my Megillat Esther over there. So in this case, my midrashic interpretation is Vashti was cast out. Now she looks in. A black and white setting from yesteryear. Postcards from another target. A chessboard of genocide. The near tamid or eternal flame of a lost synagogue. A palace of another dictator. Smokestacks from your ancestors' crematorium. I searched during my journey, but I cannot find. How can they erase without a trace, I wonder, now more than necessary, along with her dignity? Will she restore yours? So my work is being interpreted by scholars like Ori Soltis and many other people. So my work is about identity, but it's also feminist. Vashti is the first wife. She was expelled. She never comes back. Why was she expelled? Why? So I bring her back. She becomes like Alice in Wonderland. She's looking through today's newspaper and she's seeing everything from the chessboard of a war to the crematorium smokestack. And she's looking through that picture and she's come back as a renewed person. So here's another example. I love feminist interpretations of in the Midrash, and I studied with many rabbis, and they are amazing to study with. And I love Lilith. Lilith is not even written in the Torah, and you're going to say, Lilith? Like, who's Lilith? Lilith was the first wife of Adam, okay? So based on Jewish Midrashic legends, the character Lilith is the first Eve, who was created at the same time as Adam. She was unwilling to forego her equality with Adam. Rebuffed, she took her case to God, who responded to her seductive powers by revealing his divine name. She earned her ticket out of Pardes or paradise and into eternal exile. Thus, Lilith has been called the demoness and the serpent in the Garden of Eden. Lilith made a return in feminist history as an example of female strength and mystery. So feminist history, in feminism in America especially, there's a whole Lilith magazine. There's Lilith is being used as a symbol of female strength. She didn't do nothing. She just wanted equality. She's just banished. She goes and lives under the Red Sea. She doesn't want to come back. She's like the first ex-wife. She doesn't want to come back. And she's therefore being made into a demoness by patriarchal writings and society. So this is her. So she's becomes any woman who has been betrayed, who has survived war, whether she's, I don't care, from Ukraine or from Palestine or from Israel or from Pakistan, from India, it doesn't matter. She becomes a symbol of that betrayed woman. And so Roy Lichtenstein, which is an American pop art symbol, combined with Indian Amar Chitra Katha comics. So Indian Amar Chitra Katha comics are amazing. I grew up with them. I learned about Indian mythology because my grandmother told me you can go to a Hindu temple, you can go to a mosque, but you can't bow down to it. So I had many Hindu and Muslim friends, and I would go and I would eat and I would be during the festivals, but I always remembered that I could go to a Catholic church, but never take communion. Go to a Hindu temple, but never worship the idol. And so I learned about Hindu mythology through these comic books, actually. And they were very amazing to learn about. And of course, Bollywood. So I grew up in Mumbai. My mother ran a school for 20 years. And guess what? All the Bollywood kids would come to my mom's school. So I didn't think much of it growing up. But when I was growing up, all these actors and actresses would come every morning to drop their kids off. And I would think nothing of it. I'd be like, here's another Bollywood movie with a hero and heroine running around a tree, dancing and singing songs and the same old story, And when I came to America, I thought about this incredible pop culture that I grew up in, which was Bollywood. And the glitz and the glamour of it was something that I kind of comes through in my work too a little bit. And so here's another example. So all of this serves as an inspiration for my Lilith series. The Indian Persian miniature paintings, illuminated manuscripts creep into parts of the painting. The blonde heroine in Lichtenstein's paintings has been cast as a blue maiden. So you will ask, and you're going to ask, why blue? Why are my characters blue? People have said, well, of course, I'm influenced by Indian icons and Krishna and whatever, but it's not about that. Very often I look at my skin and it has turned blue. It tends to do that when I face certain situations of people who are stereotyping and categorizing other people who are unlike themselves. I have therefore over the years developed many blue skin characters in my paintings. This blue self-portrait of sorts takes on many roles and forms, through which I can theatrically explore ancient and contemporary dilemmas. I'm inspired by the Indian gods like Kali and the famous blue god Krishna, but that's not it. I show how these characters use their blue skin to tell or mostly retell the stories. In this process of recycling and rejuvenating, they merely remind me making the work, and hopefully my audience in viewing the work, that myth making is cyclical and timeless. The blue skin therefore has become for me a symbol of being a Jewish woman of color. And the blue color is from my synagogues in India. It's not just Krishna or whatever. It's the color of the synagogues I come from. It is from the talit. It is from the Israeli flag. It is from so much, the tzitzit is blue, and the special color of the blue and tzitzit comes from a special dye. So all of this blue has suddenly become for me a symbol of being the other, of being different, of being different in a way that I don't know where I belong sometimes, and I know that I belong everywhere, and sometimes I belong nowhere. And that dilemma is something that I kind of show or try to show in my work. I'm going to now go a little bit forward and tell you, just to let you know, as an artist, how does one make a living? So I make a living by using my mythology, my background, my learning. So I'm doing a lot of commissions. I earn my living full time as an artist. I pay all my bills as being an artist, because I have to compromise, but it's not really a compromise. It is people who come to me who ask me to do commissions because they like what kind of work I do. So it's not like I'm selling my soul. I'm doing something which is making a living, but at the same time, so this is, I've done 7 6-foot artworks for a 5-star hotel in New York, where every floor has paintings inspired by Indian Persian miniature paintings. For example, this is just one floor. That was a year-long project. I've done parochet and amud for many synagogues. I'm doing one right now for a synagogue in St. Louis. I'm doing a parochet and a Torah cover for the synagogue. In this case, I've done a parochet and an amud. I've also done a floor, which is 16 foot in diameter, which tells the zodiac signs, the 12 tribes, all the festivals, all the Jewish festivals. And this was for a very feminist, amazing rabbi by the name of Rabbi Susan Talvi at CRC Synagogue in St. Louis. And the synagogue is beautiful. And we went on a trip to India, and on the way back, she said, I want you to make a floor. And I said, okay, when do we start? And a year later, I had done a painting. The painting was scanned. The scan was sent to a porcelain tile factory in Florida, and the tiles were manufactured. And actually on my website, there's a whole video on the installation of the floor, which is really amazing, which is in time-lapse video. And it is now exhibited at Bar Ilan University, yes. I also got another commission where I was asked by a Ashkenazi gallery on Fifth Avenue, New York, to say, we want you to do a Megillat Esther, but you're Indian and we want you to do it in Indian Jewish, Indian miniature style. So I did a copy of it is out there. You can look at it. And so between Rabbi Burton Vysotsky at JTS, the commissioning person who was the guy who commissioned me, and a couple other rabbis, they helped me through the whole process of understanding the Megillat Esther. And this was a year-long project also, where I illuminated it on actual animal skin. So the animal skin was brought from Israel. The kosher scribe wrote the writings, so I didn't do the writings. I just did the illumination on the scroll. That's all the pictures all around. So here are some pictures of so that's Haman, as you can see, that's Mordecai. And so all the characters in this story were actually, I had to create characters. What did Esther look like? What did Mordecai look like? What did Haman look like? What did even the 2 eunuchs in the court, Harbona and Hatak look like? So I looked at Indian eunuchs in Mumbai, and I looked at pictures from there, and I fashioned characters based on that. So you'll see that, and if you want later on, I can actually point out certain things on the scroll to you over there. I've also done a commission where I did a Torah arc for a Jewish day school in the Bronx. They gave me a 3-month residency to work with their children, and then I did an actual Torah arc, which they wanted to be an Oriental kind of style. I looked at Moroccan synagogues a little bit, the green colors in the Moroccan synagogues and the onion dome kind of shapes. And I was also looking at Indian synagogues and the gold, it's 22 karat gold leaf actually on the Torah arc. Recently, I got a fun project. I was asked to do tiles for a swimming pool. So I also do private commissions. I do a lot of private commissions. I did tiles for the swimming pool in New Jersey. There's bigger mural on the other side, which is not photographed yet and wasn't installed. So this was like another way of earning a living. I do swimming pools and I do garden murals too, which is made with these porcelain tiles. And the porcelain tiles, once they are transferred to these porcelain tiles, they are 100% permanent. They don't scratch, they don't fade in the sun, and they're amazing. They're high-fired porcelain tiles. Also recently outside, there's a book I did another commission where I did a children's book. It's based on the song Hava Nagila, and I was asked to illustrate it. And this is another way where a book illustrator can get paid to do illustrations for a book. And I want to say one other thing. My next children's book, I got signed up by a wonderful publisher who is well known in America because he brought Harry Potter to America. And he has signed me and Erica Leons, who's the author, and we are doing the story of the Bnei Israel. We're going to talk about the story of the Bnei Israel as told by 2 characters, Nani Painkar, who's the grandmother, and Maya, the granddaughter. So Nani Painkar tells the story to her granddaughter about the story of the Bnei Israel and Prophet Elijah. And this publisher is very excited because he says that lesser known communities and their stories need to be highlighted. Young children need to be educated about these stories, that they don't only learn about Ashkenazi stories, but they also learn about Sephardic and Asian Jewish stories that they learn from the very beginning, and their parents learn about it also. So we're very excited because this publisher is a very big distributor. So we are hoping that it'll be even better distributed than I Am Hava. So I'm very excited about that. I haven't started work on it, but I'm going to start work on it sometime in the next few months. I also just want you to know, I make silk shawls. Some of you have bought it in Israel. I make silk shawls. And there's a talit that has been made from the synagogue floor. So the synagogue, after making the floor, made hundreds of talits and they sold it to their congregation member. There are 2 sizes, males. The men's talit is bigger and the women's talit is smaller. And also I make yoga mats that I have a separate website that I sell on. So all this kind of helps me make a living. To really take you very, very quickly through just pictures of my Indian Fulbright work. I photographed people in India. I got a Fulbright in 2011, where I went to India and I photographed Indian Jews in India. And I'm not a photographer. So I did photo collage paintings. I recorded their stories. I recorded the family stories. And then I did a photo collage on the computer. And then I painted on top of it. They're 3 by 3 feet. And I'm hoping that this project will one day be in our future museum. Yeah. Wow. Here's an example of an Indian Jewish bride. Here's a photo collage that I did on the computer, and that's the final piece. So you see how from the photograph of the person to her story, and then her story, just highlighting what an Indian Jewish bride is. And then I've just given 2 examples of here. And then my second Fulbright was in 2017. From Motherland to Fatherland, Transcultural Indian Jews in Israel. And there, I did not want to just do another photo collage paintings. I have one of my subjects right over here, my cousin Leah. So what I did in this case is I photographed the people, I recorded their stories, I videoed them, but I'm in the process of still writing several grants. So there will be lenticular prints. Lenticular prints are 3D photography, where Leah and her granddaughter, the face will be overlapped and in one photograph. So when you move from side to side, you will see both the grandmother and the granddaughter in one picture. And that is the technology that is very expensive. I'm slowly writing some grants. I've done few of them. I've done quite a few of them, but I have like, I don't know, 50 or 60. If I can do at least 20 photo collage, these kind of 3D photographs, they cost about $500 each photograph to make. So I'm writing some more grants. The first whole project, I wrote grants and I finished the whole project. I'm in the process of writing some more grants over here. Here's two sisters, so they will be overlapped. This is the daughters of my cousin Leon. They will be overlapped, and when you move from side to side, you will see both the sisters' faces in one. Ilana Shazor and her daughter, again, the same photographs, this is another technique. They will be printed into 2 by 3 feet. They'll have a really wonderful gold frame. I see them in a darkened room with this magic of these faces just changing. So I picture that, and I'm hoping that I will complete this project. Here's another father and son, Ben Israel. And the way it will be, if you can get an idea. So this is an example of me and my daughter. But if you look at my face and then it changes to my daughter's face, and sometimes somewhere in the middle of the picture, you see both of the faces at the same time. It's amazing. It's an amazing technique. So I'm hoping to do this project and finish it sometime soon. So, and last of all, this is not regarding my work. I just wanted to share one other thing with you guys. Samuel Daniel passed away a couple of days ago. And I just wanted to say that he lived in New York. He was another amazing person from my community. He has encouraged me right from the time I came to America. He's been to almost every exhibition of mine, he and his wife, Erna. He's been like a father figure to me. He has bought copies of my scroll and donated to different Ashkenazi libraries, like the JTS and places like that. He was willing to give me money, but then we found this to do this book on the Bnei Israel. He just passed away. I think he was 94. And I just wanted to acknowledge him because I think that he was one of the most amazing people from our community who really, I have a Sam Daniel file. Over the years, he sent me cuttings through mails about Bnei Israel, about Indian Jews. I've collected it. I have a Sam Daniel file. And that file helped me in this book. And he helped me with this book. And he's helped me with writing about Jews. And here's he and his wife, Erna. So Erna's from Switzerland. And I just wanted to acknowledge this amazing person. And I want to say that I hope there are more people like this in our community that will step up to the plate and will, contribute in a way that we will be remembered. I want to say again, I'm going to embarrass Avner and Ruth. Where are you, Ruth?
Thank you, Siona. I know it's getting late, but I'd like to invite a very prominent figure from our Indian community. His name is Leo Daniels. Come, Leo, and come and share some few words and tell us something about your activities.
Thank you so much, Siona. Thank you, Avner. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Ruth. Thank you, Robin Samuel, who introduced me to IJHC. I'm here to thank Siona for letting us use her pictures for Shanwar Telu. The first picture that I saw was by accident. I never knew her. Someone sent me a picture that was something like Kali Devi, the Indian Kali Mata with all those hands, 9 hands, and with the Hanukkah. So I was not sure what's Hanukkah doing with Kali Mata together. So I started looking, and this is how I got to know Siona. And for Shanwar Teli, the first Shanwar Teli, I wrote to her that I want to use her image, just one image. And she said, you can use all of my images. And since then, every Shanwar Teli, we're using her image on the first page. And thank you so much for that. You see how wonderful she is. And I must tell you that to listen to look at your painting and listen it, you saying words about it is completely different here. It's so amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Leo. So this is the end of the evening. Thank you very, very much, everyone, for coming. And I want to wish you a very happy and peaceful Shabbat. Thank you all.